Welcome to What the SaaS. I'm your host, Shaheem Alam, co-founder of FiveRings Marketing. On this show, I interview SaaS and tech founders in North America who are succeeding in their industry and provide them with the space to share their product and professional journey. Learn more from founders who are leaving a mark through innovation. Hey everyone, today we have Merav and Dimitri, both co-founders of Data Society. Now, Data Society provides tailored data science training programs for some of the world's biggest enterprises across industries, from government agencies to finance to healthcare and many more. Merav, Dimitri, how are you?
Hey, Shaheem. Thanks for having us. I'm doing well.
Thank you for having us. We're excited for the conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for being here. So, guys, I know you guys are doing some big things at Data Society today, but how did it all start?
That's a great question. I think Dimitri and I have slightly different versions. So I'll go ahead and tell mine. I'm sure Dimitri has his. But my background is actually in education. So I started my career teaching in New York City public schools. And I was really passionate about it and passionate about education, helping other people learn and really transform their circumstances. But I wanted to have a bigger impact. So I moved out of the classroom, worked for several educational institutions, and found myself back in 2014 looking for ways to use data for my own purposes. And I couldn't find any training. I didn't really know where to start in terms of how to think about how to use my data appropriately. And around that time, fortuitously, Dimitri had moved back to Washington, D.C. from New York City. We kind of known each other peripherally. So he and I got together and had a coffee just to talk about that idea. He had his own experiences with data. And we thought, well, if we can't find what we're looking for, let's build it. So the two of us, along with our third co-founder, John Nader, started this company with the purpose to really help people use data better, and to do that initially through education. And then, of course, we grew that into other arms as well. So I'll pause there and let Dimitri add in his background.
Sure. The only thing I'll add is that from my perspective, at the time, I was working at a large investment fund. We were doing very complicated deals in sectors like healthcare, finance, and energy. We built large models that try to describe the way the world can be or will be under certain scenarios. At the time, we were building those models in Excel, and we realized that there are much better tools out there using statistical programming, for example, R and Python. And when we started to leverage those, we were able to build much better models, much faster. The light bulb immediately went on because I worked at several large banks and investment institutions before, and none of them were using these types of techniques and tools operationally. I thought there was a huge opportunity to teach professionals how to do that at large scale. The rest of our business evolved from there.
Wow. So Merav, you're coming from a teaching background and you decided to jump into data science. I mean, like, talk to me about that. Like, what, I guess it was a need that you were looking to fill for your students, but fully becoming immersed in something that you just that your background has kind of like nothing to do with, talk to me about that. How was that experience?
Yeah. For me, I absolutely love learning. What I will say is I definitely did not understand what I was jumping into. Mm-hmm. But I was really excited to understand what this whole data science thing was all about, and also learn how to program, which I'd never done before. So as we were building the company and as we were creating our first courses and our first programs, I was essentially being a student myself and really learning along with that. And because of my education background, I actually think that made our content that much stronger, because we were approaching it very much from a mentality of, from a beginner mentality, to make sure that we were breaking down that barrier to entry, because it's very daunting to approach something new. And for me, I did get a lot of questions when I quit my full-time job about 9 months after we started the company. And I got a lot of questions. Oh, wow, isn't that really risky? Are you sure? Right. And for me, what I'll say is that it didn't feel like a risk. And I think that's important. I think a lot of founders will probably tell you something similar, because at the end of the day, the worst thing that happens is that you try and you fail. And you've learned a lot and you go get another job.
Yeah.
And that the best outcome is where we are today, where we, have grown our company over the past 7.5 years. And we've still learned a lot. And now we're making a much bigger impact than we would have otherwise. So for me, it didn't feel like it was as much of a risk because those were the opportunities available to me.
Right. Yeah. Something someone told me before was that it's a Shaheem, you can always get a job. We're fortunate enough that like we can always get a job. So why not try? Yeah. Why not experiment? Why not take risks? So no, I love that. And then so Dimitri, and you're coming from a data science background then, right? Like after having learned it at where you were working at the time.
Yeah, the act of learning math and code is an ongoing process. I don't think you can ever say that you learned it. I was always good at math. I always liked science. I learned to code when I was a kid. And there's a lot that I knew and a lot of experience that I had building complicated financial models, complicated simulation models for natural phenomena like energy generation from various sources. But I learned a lot as well as we were building this company. For example, I didn't have natural language processing experience before we started. I had a great mathematical background that allowed me to pick up that skill set quite quickly. But so there's a lot of technical skill sets that I picked up along the way as we had to tackle them. Graph and network analysis that are really cool ways of understanding data from a different perspective. So I learned a lot of technical skills as I went along. From my standpoint, it was similar to what Merav thought. We were 27 when we started. And back then, you're working for the experience, you're working to learn, you're working to build relationships. You're not working for the money, right? You always know that the money is going to come later in your career. And so I thought quite similarly that there really was no risk in starting something like this because we were guaranteed to learn a lot of technical skills. We were guaranteed to learn a lot of business skills, and we were guaranteed to expand the networks that we had. So the worst thing that could happen is we could, lose quote unquote a year or two of making money, which at that point wasn't that much anyways.
Right.
So to me, it actually felt in many ways like the safest thing to do because there's so many assets that you gather in the process. You're effectively investing in yourself. And in our case, fortunately, it worked out from a financial standpoint as well.
Yeah, no, that's amazing.
I was just going to add, the only caveat to that is I was fortunate enough to build up some savings. What I would recommend for anyone who's thinking about starting a business is just make sure financially you feel secure for at least, 12 months would be ideal, but at least 6 to 9, because you don't want to be in a position where, especially if you have a family, that you're unable to provide for them. So that is a really important aspect. And Dimitri and I were very fortunate to be able to do that.
I don't want to undersell it. That is critical. I've learned that you're going to need a lot more money than you think. You will always underestimate how much money something truly takes, how much effort something truly takes. And so, yes, we were right in that we were in a position where we didn't need to work for a few years and be okay. Plus, on top of that, we had the means to invest in the business. And so that was a very fortunate place to come from. I would recommend that for folks who are considering entrepreneurship, if they don't have that starting position, that they are able to team up with a capital provider. And it doesn't even have to be a venture capital firm, but some sort of cushion that would allow you to have the resources you need to string together things like a website, a brand, some type of marketing. I think entrepreneurs early on often underestimate what's hard and what's easy. And what's the hardest and the most important thing is to figure out your sales, marketing, and lead generation. That was the hardest thing for us to figure out how to do at Data Society. And among all of my friends who started different businesses, that's always the most difficult bit. I've learned that if you spend long enough, you're probably going to figure out the product. You're going to figure out the production, and you're likely to stumble into product market fit if you just talk to enough intended customers. But figuring out how you get customers at scale in an economical way is one of the most complicated things to crack. And that does require capital.
Right. I think that, the points that both of you just mentioned, that cannot be like understated. Like it is very important. It's something that I've personally learned, where I've tried to start a venture or a business with like 3 months of savings and had to shut down because savings were running out. I got to pay rent and had to fly back and restart. So I think that is very important. So no, I'm really glad that you guys mentioned that. So let's talk about the problem, that data society is solving today. When you started it, I mean, the world was, I would assume, a lot less mature than it is today when it comes to data. But still today, there's a huge skills gap. Like there are not that many professionals that are good with data. There's a big gap. But then the flip side is, they say data is the new oil. So like there's this huge thing where data is so valuable, but we don't have the talent. Let's talk about the problem you're solving then.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you bring up because we were arguably a little early. When we started, we would tell people what we did. We teach people how to work with data. We teach people how to use R, how to write, and how to use Python. And people would look at us and say, why did you call it R? Why did you call it Python? And I had to explain, we didn't call it open source. So, it was a very different time. And it was actually a number of years before we started to see major organizations take the problem seriously. It wasn't until probably 2017 that we started to see RFPs come out from government institutions, from large corporations that said, oh, we actually want to teach people how to use code and data better. And so today that problem in a way persists. The challenges that I see in the interactions with our customers is understanding who needs to know what. So a very critical piece is understanding what a learning path looks like, assessing somebody's starting skill set, having a crisp view of somebody's desired skill set and why that skill set is valuable to the mission of the company or government institution you're working for, and being able to chart that course. If you go online, there's no shortage of self-paced training programs.
Right.
And when you see in aggregate is most of the time, those programs fail to achieve tangible results for organization because people learn together with others. Knowing something is different than changing your behavior, right? Like how many of how many people know how to do a push-up, right? How many people do push-ups regularly? So that's the exact same challenge. And so the challenge that we see that persists today is groups of people, no matter the context, understanding how to use data intelligently and being able to do it in a collaborative way where they're able to build tools, projects, and achieve outcomes together.
Yeah. And, building off of what Dimitri is saying, if we take a step back and look at the bigger picture, there are two things that can transform the way that we work, and that's education and that's data. Our vision, right, and where we see things is if we train enough individuals to understand even just how to ask the right questions about data, how to think about it, understand the value of it, you are fundamentally transforming the way that an organization works, the way that an industry works. And that's when you see change at a massive scale. I mean, even if you take the past 2 years, we've been in this pandemic and data has been the only way for us to determine where outbreaks are, how fast it's spreading. It's helped us develop vaccines much faster. I mean, it's literally a life and death situation. And the ability for people to understand data helps accelerate decisions that ripple down to everyone, especially if you're thinking about decisions made at the federal government level, state and local. So the problem that we're solving is that gap that exists right now there's a communication gap between data professionals and non-data professionals who don't know how to interact. And as a result, there's a lot of information and there's a lot of insights that are being lost, not to mention the fact that data scientists and analysts get really frustrated because they're overwhelmed by requests from folks who are not really asking the right question. So that's one fundamental challenge that we're solving. And just the fact that there's so much data out there, there are estimates that something like 70% of data is never analyzed. That's over $100 billion that are lost in productivity every year. And we have the majority, 3/4 of professionals feel overwhelmed with data. So you can't hire your way out of something like that, right? There are 250,000 jobs in 2020 that went unfilled with a data scientist role. The only way to get people to that level of data literacy is via training programs. And just like Dimitri said, there is a place for online learning and asynchronous learning, of course. But if it were perfect, we wouldn't be in business, right? There's obviously a need for the types of programs that we do, where there's an instructor that can help guide individuals, whereas there's that interactivity between colleagues who get to know each other and then continue this culture of learning even afterwards, which we see a lot. So we provide that level of service and value to fill that need and to bridge that skills gap and that communications gap.
Another way to look at this is we're going to continue to collect and generate more and more data about more and more things and activities. How long would it take somebody to become a physician, to learn the healthcare industry, to learn the financial services industry, right? That takes years to acquire that domain expertise. But I can teach somebody how to do math or how to use a new piece of software in less than a week. So can you afford not to train your people to be more quantitatively minded? And you can't hire out of a problem like that, because looking for intersections of, I want somebody who is both a mathematician, a programmer, and an expert in healthcare. That's a very small pool of people, and they're very expensive. It's a lot less expensive to train your existing healthcare professional. When people ask me, give me an example of how would this help me? Tell people, how often do you make decisions in an organization based on a heuristic? And there's usually a lot of hands that go up. And then I ask them, so what are you more afraid of, mosquitoes or sharks? Right? I say, well, sharks. Right. Well, why? And in what context? Because mosquitoes kill about 800,000 people a year. Sharks kill 50, right? So again, let me ask you again, what are you more afraid of? Statistically, what's going to hurt you more, a mosquito or a shark? And then people say, yeah, we need to get smarter about how to leverage data.
Right. So do you think that, see, right now you're solving this problem where you're providing training for employees within organizations. Do you think that this is how it will be in the future as well? Or do you think like the education system is going to catch up and people are going to just be, just coming out more trained and more data literate? Like, how do you see the future of data training?
So, of course, you see evolution in university settings. It's natural. But the goal of a university is to give somebody solid academic theoretical foundations. They're critical because without that, you can't make breakthroughs. However, when you're at your desk at work, there's a very specific, very industry focused problem you need to solve. And you're busy, you don't have a lot of time. And so you need somebody to help you how to solve a very specific type of problem. That customized niche level of expertise never has been, nor is it likely to be the domain of universities. So it's a fundamentally different challenge. So I don't think that's going away. Another thing we've learned over the past almost decade now is people learn from other people. We're social animals, right? If it was enough to read a book to learn something, then teachers would be out of jobs a very long time ago. And yet we still have teachers, right, for a reason, because when people get together, they build relationships, not just with the instructor, but with each other. And so dynamic, customized, instructor-led, mentorship-driven programs are not going to go anywhere. One of the ways that we really drive value for our clients is during training programs, we have folks build capstone projects that are directly related to the missions given by their bosses and managers. So at the end of a training program, it's not like you just got new software in your people, right? They didn't just learn a new skill set. They actually come out with something tangible. And that galvanizes organizational momentum to say, let's do that again. Let's bring more of these projects to life. And then the return on the investment of time and money becomes obvious.
Great.
Yeah, I think the future of learning won't ever go away. I think the question is also around at what point will the topic shift? You are right. At some point, we will get to a point where data literacy will be as fundamental as the math or reading. Where are we going next? We'll see. I think by the time people catch up to data literacy, we are talking about at least 5 to 10 years. There's a lot of folks that need to be trained and need to understand this field. And there are a lot of organizations that are still at the beginning of their data journey. So I think as other individuals start to catch up, we might start to see other technologies emerge that will then become the new data.
Right.
I think the world's also changing faster and faster. I think it's an accepted fact now that an education is worth only 5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
After 5 years, the world shifts enough that you need to continuously retrain your skills, whether or not you're already data literate. And so I think that if anything, education is going to become increasingly tailored on specific needs rather than more broad. And it's going to be part and parcel to any career development rather than something you do a handful of times throughout your life.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Technology is, it's moving so fast. It's insane. So, and you have to keep up. So, no, it makes a lot of sense. For our founders, early stage founders, mid stage founders that are building their companies right now, they might not be at the level where they can hire, expensive data scientists or, sign up for data societies, training programs. What are some best practices? Like, what is some advice that you can give them to still leverage data and be able to utilize it at the early stage of their companies?
I think start with where you can, is the advice I like to give. So what does that mean? One of the toughest challenges for any data professional or any project and analysis is data collection. It's just collecting the data. It can be difficult. Finding the data can be difficult. So if you're just starting out, let's say you are a retail business, collect your customer data day one. Start to collect all of that data. If you're sending out email marketing campaigns, collect all the information on an individual level. So you will at least have all of that. And when you do have some time to even do some basic trends, right? That's something you can do in Excel. Just determine, hey, who's even opening your emails? What traits do they have in common? Where are people coming from to get to your website? All of these questions are ones you can use Google Analytics for, which is usually included with, many websites and if you use the Gmail suite. So start with those tools. Excel is still very powerful. And use the tools that you have at your disposal. And then once you have a good enough data analysis or your data collection process, or you're far enough in your business where you can bring somebody in to do something more in depth, that's great. But for a lot of times, just getting started, just that data collection and the high overview of trends is more than enough.
I think when you're starting in a business, your job as an entrepreneur is to figure out what the right problems are to solve, right? Mm-hmm. And if you can't figure out the right challenges to tackle, then you're going to have a hard time being successful anyways. Once you've figured out what those challenges are, just ask yourself, how do I measure that? Just that one simple question. If you're trying to solve the problem of how do I acquire customers most effectively, then you just ask yourself, how do you measure my cost of acquiring customers? How do I measure how many people I've helped? How do I measure how much plastic I need to build the next electric car? Mm-hmm. So, and then just, yes, as Merav said, Google it. And there's an incredible amount of things that you'll find on the internet, but it has to start with, if you want to accomplish something, what is it you want to accomplish? And how do you measure it?
How do you measure it? I like that. I think that's like a very actionable piece of advice there that we can definitely take from there. How do you measure it? Awesome. And Dimitri, you've been talking a lot about kind of like, well, one of the biggest things is, if you spend enough time, you'll get the product down, you'll figure it out. You talk to enough customers, you'll figure it out. But that sales piece, right? How did you guys figure out that sales piece?
Through a lot of trial, error, blood, sweat, and tears, and, God knows what else. So it was very difficult for us to figure out the right way to source leads. And a little bit of a shameless plug here, Shahim, you've been a huge help in figuring out exactly how to do that. That was a huge challenge. And a second one was figuring out the right profile and skill set for our client service reps. So what you figure out in our line of work is you are an advisor to the customer around how to train their people on a technical topic. And there's another half of our business where we actually build a lot of custom tools for our clients and help with entire data transformation projects on the consulting side of our business. Mm-hmm. So you're really advising people. And what we learn over time is that our quote unquote salespeople actually had to be technical experts. And so they couldn't approach a customer from a how do I sell you standpoint. They had to approach a customer from how do I provide really helpful advice to you standpoint.
Right.
In hindsight, that should have been obvious, because at first, when we were just starting out, we did a lot of work for free. And we were just trying to help people. And we actually grew our original book of business because people kept calling us because we did good things for people, oftentimes for very low dollars. And over time, we built that book of business. And so it should have only followed that the right type of person to be in sales for us needs to be somebody with a technical background. But it took us a minute to figure that out. And so in an end state, in hindsight, you could say that, well, this could have been obvious, right? You engage a very capable sort of cold lead gen firm like the one that you run. You get a very good head of marketing. I think PR has been a really powerful force for us, where if a few years ago we would call people and they would say, Data Society, we have never heard of you. Ever since we became proactive about getting out there, writing articles, expressing a point of view, all of a sudden people say when we call, oh, Data Society, we've heard of you somewhere. That has changed the dynamic. And the last piece has been the right type of account executive who has the right sort of consultative background and approach that can really help our customers. So they don't feel like they're being sold to, because they're not. They're really just being helped. And as a result, they end up doing business with us. This is my fourth company. And so I've learned that it's different in every business. This has been a very different process from the other ones that I've been in. And what I regrettably have to share with other entrepreneurs is that you have to figure out what's right for your market, your target customer, and the space you're trying to play in. There's no one size fits all model, but some of the elements are true.
Interesting. Merav, did you want to add anything there?
I think what Dimitri said is exactly right. Understanding the product, and the biggest thing is just be helpful. If you are helping others, you're building a good foundation of trust, which is incredibly important with all of our clients and our partners. And the money will come because you're providing something that's valuable to others.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And like, to summarize, I think those are really great points. It's be more of that advisor, looking to genuinely help someone solve a problem, whatever dollar amount is really attached to it in the beginning. Because at that point, you're building your book, you're starting to build your reputation, get yourself out there. And then afterwards it comes. And when you're building a sales team, you mentioned, looking for people with a technical background, at least in your industry, looking for people with a technical background, but also that consultative background. So they really partner with your customers to help them find the best solution. And then having, marketing, head of marketing, getting PR, and really, I guess, establishing yourself as a thought leader in the space. I think that there's huge ROI on that, right?
That's right. That's right. Those are absolutely the three key elements. The art of it is an execution in the context of each business model.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Well, Dimitri, Merav, it was a pleasure having you on the show. I think I learned a lot. I think our listeners definitely learned a lot as well. And if our listeners wanted to find and connect with you, where can they find you?
We're at datasociety.com, where you can also shoot us a note at hello@datasociety.com. I'm active on LinkedIn. I think Dimitri is as well. I do have a Twitter. I'm, to the chagrin of our VP of our marketing team, not as active on Twitter, but feel free to communicate with me on there as well.
No, I think that's about right. The best way to reach me is to ping me on LinkedIn. I monitor that a lot. And Merav is right. hello@datasociety.com is a great place to find us. Do engage with us. We are eager to talk to folks. We love being out there and sharing ideas. So thank you, and Shahim, thank you so much for inviting us to be on the show. We hope this was a useful session to your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was great. Thank you for being here, and chat soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Don't forget to follow this podcast for regular SaaS stories and updates on new cutting-edge technology. If you enjoyed the show, please share this podcast with your colleagues. We also have a Slack community made just for tech founders, leaders, and investors called What the SaaS, where we provide resources, networking, funding opportunities, and more. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.